Rebecca Stone adjusted her pearl earrings for the third time, a nervous habit she couldn't shake. The law office smelled of expensive leather and old books, the kind of place where marriages came to die with dignity. Through the window of the downtown Chicago high-rise, Lake Michigan stretched endlessly, gray and cold under the November sky. "Mrs. Stone, if you'll just sign here." Attorney David Brennan slid the papers across the mahogany table, his voice professionally gentle. Her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, sat 3 feet away, but it might as well have been 3 miles. Julian Hartwell hadn't looked at her once since entering the room 20 minutes ago. His attention remained fixed on his phone, probably monitoring stock prices or approving another acquisition for Hartwell Technologies. Even now, at the end of their 8-year marriage, work came first. When success becomes loneliness. Rebecca picked up the gold pen, its weight familiar in her hand. Julian had given it to her on their 2nd anniversary, back when he still remembered anniversaries. She glanced at him, the sharp jawline, the silver threading through his dark brown hair at the temples, the custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He looked tired. No, exhausted. The kind of bone-deep weariness that came from building an empire while forgetting to build a life. "Julian," she said quietly. He didn't respond, his thumb scrolling through emails. "Julian," she repeated, louder this time. He finally looked up, his hazel eyes meeting hers with barely concealed impatience. "What is it, Rebecca? Let's just get this over with." The attorney shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in organizing papers that were already perfectly organized. The weight of unspoken words. Get this over with. 8 years reduced to an inconvenient appointment wedged between a board meeting and a conference call with Tokyo investors. Rebecca felt something crack inside her chest, not her heart, that had broken gradually over the past 3 years, but something else. Her resolve, maybe. Or her fear. "There's something you need to know before I sign these," she said. Julian sighed, the sound cutting through her like glass. "Rebecca, we've been through this. The settlement is generous. You're getting the brownstone in Lincoln Park, the house in Aspen, and enough money to—" "I'm dying," she said, the words hung in the air like smoke. Julian's phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the table. Attorney Brennan froze, his pen suspended mid-air. "What did you say?" Julian's voice came out strangled. Rebecca reached into her leather bag and pulled out a manila folder, her hand steadier than she'd expected. Inside were test results, pathology reports, scans showing shadows where there should be none. She'd carried this folder for 2 weeks, debating whether to tell him at all. The diagnosis that changed everything, stage 3 pancreatic cancer, she said, meeting his eyes directly. "I got the diagnosis 14 days ago. I've been to 3 different specialists. They all say the same thing, aggressive treatment starting immediately, maybe 18 months if we're lucky, possibly less." Julian's face had gone pale, all the color draining away. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. 14 days? You've known for 2 weeks and you didn't." He stopped, ran both hands through his hair. "Why didn't you call me? Why would I?" The question came out more bitter than she'd intended. "You haven't answered my calls in months unless they were about the divorce proceedings. You moved out 9 months ago. You made it clear our marriage was just another failed investment you needed to liquidate. That's not fair. Isn't it?" Rebecca stood too, facing him across the table that separated them. "Tell me, Julian, when was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you asked about my day, my work at the gallery, anything that didn't involve lawyers or property division?" The truth neither wanted to face. Julian's jaw clenched, that familiar muscle twitching the way it did when he was cornered in a negotiation. "You're the one who filed for divorce. You're the one who said you couldn't do this anymore. Because I was already alone." Rebecca's voice cracked, years of frustration breaking through. "I was married to a ghost who occasionally slept in the same house. You were always gone, business trips to Singapore, emergency meetings in San Francisco, late nights at the office. I spent our 7th anniversary eating takeout by myself while you closed a deal in Frankfurt. I was building something, Julian shot back. Everything I did was for us, for our future. We didn't have a future. We had your company's quarterly projections. Attorney Brennan cleared his throat. Perhaps we should reschedule. No, Rebecca said firmly, her eyes never leaving Julian's face. I came here to sign these papers. I came here to end this marriage the same way it's been for 3 years, as a formality, a transaction. She pushed the medical folder toward him. But I thought you deserved to know that when you sign these papers, you're not just divorcing your wife. You're walking away from someone who won't be here next year. The moment truth demands a choice. Julian picked up the folder with trembling hands, flipping through the pages. Rebecca watched his face as he read, the way his eyes widened at the CT scan results, how his breathing became shallow when he reached the oncologist's prognosis, the way his hand gripped the edge of the table when he saw the treatment schedule. This says you start chemotherapy in 5 days, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes. And the surgery, in 3 weeks, if the preliminary chemo shrinks the tumor enough. He looked up at her, and for the first time in years, she saw past the billionaire CEO, past the ruthless businessman who'd built a tech empire from nothing. She saw the man she'd married, the one who'd proposed on a rainy Tuesday because he couldn't wait for perfect weather, who'd danced with her in their tiny first apartment's kitchen, who'd once believed love was more important than market share. Why tell me at all? He asked. You could have signed the papers, taken the settlement, and I would never have known until. He couldn't finish the sentence. The question with no easy answer. Rebecca sat back down, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the revelation was fading, leaving behind the constant ache that had become her companion since the diagnosis. I asked myself that same question every day for 2 weeks. Part of me wanted to spare you. Part of me wanted to punish you by keeping it secret. She laughed, a hollow sound. But mostly, I realized I didn't want to disappear from your life as just another signature on a contract. Even if our marriage failed, even if we couldn't make it work, I wanted you to know that I was real. That this was real. Julian sank into his chair, the folder still clutched in his hands. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, taxis honking, people rushing to important meetings, the world spinning forward while their small drama played out 40 floors above the streets. I don't know what to say, he admitted. You don't have to say anything. Just sign the papers. Your lawyer can file them, and you can go back to your life. I'll face this the same way I've faced everything else for the past 3 years, alone. The word hung between them like an accusation and a truth neither could deny. Julian looked at the divorce papers, then at the medical folder, then at Rebecca, really looked at her for the first time in months. He noticed things he'd missed, the weight she'd lost, making her collarbones too prominent, the shadows under her green eyes, the way she held herself with a fragility that hadn't been there before. Rebecca, he started, but his phone buzzed again. And again. His assistant's name flashing on the screen, probably wondering where he was, why he was missing the quarterly investors' meeting that would determine whether their stock price climbed or plummeted. She saw him glance at it, saw the familiar war in his expression, duty versus everything else. Go ahead, she said quietly. Answer it. Some things never change. But Julian did something that surprised them both. He picked up the phone, powered it off completely, and set it face down on the table. Then he picked up the pen and looked at the divorce papers, his hand hovering over the signature line as the afternoon light shifted across the room, and Rebecca held her breath, wondering which choice he would make. Julian's hand trembled over the signature line, the pen frozen in midair. Attorney Brennan had excused himself, claiming he needed to take an urgent call, though everyone in the room knew he was simply giving them privacy. The office felt too quiet now, just the muted sounds of traffic 40 floors below and the electric hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. How long have you been in pain? Julian asked suddenly, setting the pen down. Rebecca blinked, surprised by the question. What? You're holding your left side, he said, nodding toward where her hand pressed against her ribs. You do that when something hurts. You've always done it, when you had the flu 4 years ago, when you broke your ribs skiing in Colorado. How long have you been doing that? She hadn't even realized her hand was there. Slowly, she lowered it to her lap. 6 months, maybe 7. I thought it was stress. The gallery was going through restructuring, and she stopped. We were already falling apart. The pieces that never fit. Julian stood and walked to the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. I remember that time. Spring, right? You mentioned feeling tired all the time. I told you to take a vacation. You told me to take a vacation, Rebecca repeated, the memory sharp. You didn't offer to come with me. You didn't ask if something was wrong. You just suggested I go somewhere and rest, preferably somewhere that wouldn't interrupt your schedule. He winced but didn't turn around. I was in the middle of the quantum merger. We were hemorrhaging money, and the board was threatening to. He stopped, laughed bitterly. Listen to me. Still making excuses. Rebecca studied his back, the rigid set of his shoulders. Even now, carrying the weight of her diagnosis, he looked like a man preparing for battle. You want to know the worst part? She said. When Dr. Walsh told me, my first thought wasn't about dying. It was about whether I should tell you. I actually sat in her office, looking at scans of my own organs shutting down, and wondered if you'd even care enough to put down your work. That made him turn around. Of course I would have cared. Would you? She kept her voice level, clinical almost. Or would you have delegated it? Hired the best doctors, written enormous checks, made sure I had everything I needed, and then gone right back to your office because that's where you feel in control. The truth neither could escape. Julian's phone buzzed on the table despite being powered off, some final notification escaping before complete shutdown. Neither of them looked at it. Is that really what you think of me? He asked. That I'm so cold, so detached that I wouldn't. He stopped, seemed to struggle with something. Rebecca, I built Hartwell Technologies from nothing. When we met, I was running code out of a basement apartment, surviving on instant ramen and ambition. I promised you I'd give you the world. I never wanted the world, she said softly. I wanted Tuesday morning breakfasts. I wanted someone to notice when I cut my hair. I wanted a husband who remembered that I hate roses because they remind me of funerals, so maybe don't send them for every obligatory occasion. The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. Julian moved back to the table, sat down heavily. I sent you roses last month for your birthday. 36 red roses. Your assistant ordered them. The card said, "Best wishes, Julian." Like I was a client. When money cannot buy what matters. I'm sorry, he said, and for once, it didn't sound like a negotiation tactic. I'm sorry for all of it. The missed dinners, the forgotten anniversaries, the roses. He picked up the medical folder again, flipped through pages with increasing desperation. But this, Rebecca, there has to be something we can do. What did Dr. Walsh say about experimental treatments? Clinical trials? I can make calls, get you into Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, anywhere in the world. There it was. The Julian she knew, solving problems with money and connections, treating life's crises like business challenges to be overcome through sheer force of will and unlimited resources. I'm already enrolled in a trial, she said. Dr. Walsh got me into a program at Northwestern. It's aggressive, and the side effects will be brutal, but it's my best shot. Then I'll hire private nurses, rent an apartment near the hospital, make sure you have everything. Julian, stop. Rebecca held up her hand. This isn't a deal you can close. This isn't something you can fix by throwing money at it. Then what am I supposed to do? The frustration in his voice was raw, real. Just sign these papers and pretend you didn't tell me you're dying. The question with impossible answers. Rebecca looked at the divorce papers, crisp and official, their marriage reduced to legal clauses and property divisions. Then she looked at Julian, really looked at him. Behind the expensive suit and the billionaire confidence, she saw fear. The same fear that kept her awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling and counting the minutes until dawn. I don't know, she admitted. I've been asking myself that same question for 2 weeks. Part of me wants to be strong, face this alone, prove I don't need anyone. But part of me, her voice caught. Part of me is terrified. The thought of going through chemo alone, of waking up from surgery with no one there, of spending whatever time I have left in an empty apartment, she stopped, swallowed hard. It terrifies me more than the cancer does. Julian reached across the table, his hand stopping inches from hers. You don't have to be alone. Don't I? We're here to end our marriage, Julian. We both know it's been over for a long time. Finding out I'm sick doesn't change the fact that we stopped being partners years ago. Maybe it should change things, he said quietly. The proposal neither expected. Rebecca pulled her hand back. What are you saying? I'm saying, Julian stood, paced to the window and back, a caged energy in his movements. I'm saying I don't want to sign these papers. Not now. Not like this. You can't stay married to me out of pity. It's not pity. He stopped pacing, faced her directly. It's guilt and regret and the sudden realization that I've been chasing the wrong things for 3 years. Maybe longer. He gestured at the medical folder. Reading about tumor markers and treatment protocols, all I could think was, when did I stop noticing? When did you go from being the most important thing in my life to just another obligation I was failing at? Rebecca felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. You can't fix 3 years of neglect with a grand gesture, Julian. That's not how this works. I know that. But maybe, he sat down again, closer this time. Maybe I can be there for the next 18 months. Maybe I can actually be your husband instead of just the name on your marriage certificate, the offer that complicated everything. And then what? Rebecca's voice was sharper than she intended. I go through hell with chemo, lose my hair, throw up every day, waste away to nothing, and you get to play the noble husband caring for his dying wife? That's not a marriage, Julian. That's a death watch. He flinched but didn't look away. You're right. But it's more than what we have now, which is 2 strangers signing papers and walking away. He picked up the divorce papers, held them for a moment, then set them aside. I'm not signing these. Not today. Julian, hear me out, he interrupted. Give me 6 months. Let me prove I can be the partner you needed me to be all along. No business trips. I'll delegate the day-to-day operations to my VP team. I'll be at every doctor's appointment, every treatment session. I'll actually be present in your life. And if the treatment doesn't work? The question came out as a whisper. If 6 months from now, I'm worse instead of better, the promise that demanded everything. Julian reached across the table again, and this time he took her hand. His palm was warm, familiar despite months of distance between them. Then at least we won't have wasted whatever time you have left in lawyers' offices and separate apartments. At least you won't be alone. Rebecca looked down at their joined hands, remembering when they used to fit together easily, naturally. When had they stopped holding hands? When had they stopped touching at all except in the perfunctory ways married people did when they'd forgotten why they married in the first place? This is crazy, she said. We were minutes away from being divorced. I know. We've barely spoken in months except through lawyers. I know. You might be doing this out of guilt, and I might die anyway, and then you'll have wasted 6 months of your life on a marriage that was already dead. I know, Julian said again, squeezing her hand gently. But I also know that 3 weeks from now, you're having surgery. And if you're lying in a hospital bed and I'm in a board meeting, signing papers with my new attorney because we went ahead with the divorce, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Whatever happens, however this ends, I don't want that regret, the choice that changed everything. Rebecca closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a mistake. They had failed at marriage once already. Being sick wouldn't magically fix the problems that had driven them apart. If anything, it would make things harder, more complicated, more painful. But then she thought about the alternative, facing chemo alone, recovering from surgery in an empty room, making life-or-death decisions with no one to talk to except doctors who saw her as a case file. She thought about the nights ahead, the fear that would come in the darkness, the moments when she'd need someone to hold her hand and tell her it would be okay, even if they both knew it might not be. 6 months, she said finally, opening her eyes. No promises beyond that. If the treatment works, if I'm still here in 6 months, we reevaluate everything. The marriage, the divorce, all of it. 6 months, Julian agreed. And you have to mean it, Rebecca continued, her voice stronger now. No half measures. No checking your phone during doctor's appointments. No emergency meetings that can't wait. If we're doing this, if we're trying to salvage something from this wreckage, then you're all in. Julian picked up his phone from the table, looked at it for a long moment, at the dozens of missed notifications, the alerts about meetings and conference calls and decisions that needed his immediate attention. Then he opened the window and dropped it out. Rebecca gasped. Julian. That's a 40-story drop. I know. He turned back to her with something that might have been a smile. I have a backup phone at the office. But that's the phone I used to ignore you for 3 years. Good riddance. Despite everything, Rebecca laughed. It came out shaky, half hysterical, but genuine. That was possibly the most dramatic and expensive gesture you've ever made. Wait until you see what I do tomorrow, he said, and this time he definitely smiled. I'm calling an emergency board meeting to announce I'm taking a leave of absence. The beginning of something uncertain. Attorney Brennan chose that moment to knock on the door. I hate to interrupt, but I have another appointment in 15 minutes. Should I prepare to file these papers? Julian and Rebecca looked at each other, then at the divorce papers still sitting on the table, unsigned and suddenly irrelevant. No, Julian said. We're withdrawing the petition. Brennan's eyebrows shot up. Are you certain? Because procedurally, once we withdraw, we're certain, Rebecca said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. We have some things to work out. After Brennan left, shaking his head and muttering about billionaires and their impulsive decisions, Julian and Rebecca sat in the quiet office, neither quite sure what came next. I should probably go home, Rebecca said finally. To the brownstone. My home. Our home, Julian corrected. If you'll have me back. She studied his face, looking for signs of doubt or hesitation. But all she saw was a man who'd just made an impossible promise, and against all odds, seemed to mean it. I start chemo in 5 days, she reminded him. It's not going to be pretty. I don't need pretty. I just need you to give me a chance to be better than I was. Rebecca stood, gathering her things. Julian moved to help her with her coat, a small gesture he hadn't made in years. As they walked toward the elevator, her hand found his, and he held it like he might never let go. Neither of them knew if 6 months would be enough time. Neither knew if Julian could actually keep his promises or if Rebecca would survive the treatment ahead. But as the elevator descended toward the street level, carrying them away from the divorce that almost was, they both felt something they hadn't felt in years: hope. Fragile and uncertain, but hope nonetheless. Rebecca woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, she forgot where she was, then remembered. The brownstone. Their brownstone. The master bedroom she'd avoided for 9 months, sleeping instead in the guest room down the hall because this space felt too empty, too full of memories of better times. But Julian had come home with her last night. Actually come home, carrying her overnight bag, making tea in the kitchen while she sat at the counter watching him move through the space like he'd never left. They'd talked until 2 in the morning, really talked, about everything and nothing. About her diagnosis. About his company. About the years that had slipped away while they weren't paying attention. Now she could hear him downstairs, the clatter of dishes and the smell of coffee drifting up the stairs. Rebecca sat up slowly, pressing her hand to her side where the pain lived. The cancer didn't care that she and Julian were trying again. It didn't pause for reconciliation or hoped at the reality that wouldn't wait. By the time she made it downstairs, Julian had transformed their kitchen into something resembling breakfast chaos. Eggs in one pan, toast burning in the toaster, coffee everywhere. "When did you forget how to cook?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. He looked up, smiled sheepishly. "I've been eating takeout for 9 months. Give me a break." He abandoned the eggs, walked over to her. "How are you feeling?" "Honestly? Scared." She let him pull her into a hug, rested her head against his chest. "I have the pre-treatment appointment this afternoon with Dr. Walsh. They're going to go over all the side effects, the risks, everything that could go wrong." "I'll be there," Julian said into her hair. "You don't have to, Rebecca." He pulled back to look at her. "I'm going to be at every appointment." "That's the deal, remember," the sister who saw everything. They were interrupted by the doorbell. Julian frowned. "Are you expecting someone?" Before Rebecca could answer, a voice called from the entryway. "Don't tell me you're burning breakfast again, Jules." Natalie Hartwell appeared in the kitchen doorway, Julian's younger sister, carrying shopping bags and wearing her trademark concerned expression. "I heard about," she stopped when she saw them together. "Oh. I didn't know you'd be here, Julian." "Change of plans," he said carefully. "Rebecca and I are working some things out." Natalie's sharp eyes moved between them, reading the situation with the precision. Made her one of Chicago's most successful family therapists. Working things out. That's an interesting way to phrase calling off a divorce. She set down her bags, hugged Rebecca tightly. "Your brother Thomas called me last night, worried sick. Said you told him about the diagnosis but not much else. The truth that demanded sharing." Rebecca pulled away. "I was going to call him today. I've been trying to figure out what to say. How about starting with, 'I have cancer and I'm scared'?" Natalie suggested gently. "Thomas loves you. He deserves to know what you're facing." Julian poured coffee, handed cups to both women. "I'm calling a family meeting. Tonight, if possible. Rebecca's brother, my parents, you. Everyone who needs to know." "Julian," Rebecca started. "You said I had to be all in," he interrupted. "That means no more secrets, no more handling things alone. We tell our families, we let them help." He paused. "If that's okay with you." It was such a small thing, asking her permission instead of making executive decisions. But Rebecca felt something shift in her chest. "Okay. Tonight." The doctor who told the truth. Dr. Patricia Walsh's office at Northwestern Memorial felt less like a medical space and more like someone's comfortable study. Books lined the walls, soft jazz played from hidden speakers, and the chairs were designed for actual human comfort rather than sterile efficiency. "Rebecca," Dr. Walsh said warmly, then noticed Julian. "And Mr. Hartwell. I didn't expect to see you here." "We're working through some things," Julian said, taking the seat next to Rebecca and reaching for her hand. Dr. Walsh's expression softened with understanding. She'd been through this countless times, serious illness either breaking couples apart or forging them back together. "Well, I'm glad you're both here. The next few months are going to be challenging, and having support makes a real difference." She pulled up scans on her computer screen, images of Rebecca's pancreas with the tumor highlighted in angry yellow. Julian's hand tightened on Rebecca's. "The protocol that promised nothing. The clinical trial you're enrolled in uses a combination approach," Dr. Walsh explained. 3 rounds of aggressive chemotherapy to shrink the tumor, followed by surgery to remove what we can, then additional chemo to target any remaining cancer cells." She paused, letting that sink in. I won't lie to you. The side effects will be severe. Nausea, fatigue, hair loss, compromised immune system, potential organ damage. You'll feel worse before you feel better. What are her chances? Julian asked, his voice rough. With this particular trial, we're seeing about a 45% success rate for patients at Rebecca's stage. That means tumor reduction to operable levels, successful surgery, and no recurrence within 5 years. And the other 55%? Rebecca needed to know. Dr. Walsh met her eyes directly. Some patients don't respond to the treatment. Some develop complications. Some, she stopped, chose her words carefully. Some run out of time before we can get them to surgery. The silence that spoke volumes. The drive home was quiet. Julian navigated Chicago traffic while Rebecca stared out the window, watching the city pass by. Normal people going about normal lives, unaware that their world could change with a single doctor's appointment. 45%, Julian said finally. Better than I expected, honestly. It's not good enough. Rebecca turned to look at him. It's what we have. I can either focus on the 45% chance it works, or the 55% chance it doesn't. I'm choosing to focus on the 45. That's very, he searched for the word. Pragmatic? Optimistic? Delusional? Brave, he finished. You're the bravest person I know. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm terrified, Julian. I'm terrified of the pain, of losing myself to the disease, of dying alone in a hospital room at 3 in the morning. You won't be alone, he promised. Whatever happens, whenever it happens, you won't be alone. The family that gathered. That evening, their living room filled with people who loved them. Thomas Stone arrived first, Rebecca's older brother, pulling her into a bear hug that lasted a full minute. You should have called me immediately, he said, his voice thick with emotion.